Welcome to Bosco's Garden. I'm Shane, and this is my wife Kay. This is my mum, and this is my dad. This is our garden, Bosco's Garden, and it has shaped us as much as we have shaped it. These are Bosco's boots. It's been almost 10 years since he wore them last. He was my older brother, who is now younger than me. Bosco was an extrovert for sure. He made friends a lot easier than I did. He was generally fearless, and even though I was 5 years younger, he expected the same of me. One day, when I was about 3 years old, he became handy with a wrench and decided to remove the stabilizers from my bike, convincing me I could ride without them and setting me off down a slope. He always pushed me to step out of my comfort zone, to go on the scary rides and climb the tallest trees. He wasn't one to shy away from an experience, and always pushed the limits of those around him. He lived more in his 27 years on this planet than some do in a lifetime. This is a film about growing in Bosco's boots. About 15 years ago, we became interested in growing our own food and living a self-sufficient lifestyle closer to nature. Then we discovered permaculture. We watched online videos of Bill Mollison and Jeff Lawton's food forests in Australia, Sepp Holzer's aquaculture in the Austrian Alps, Amelia Hazep's experiments with no-dig gardening in France, and Robert Hart's edible forest gardens in England. And so inspired were we that we got a small polytunnel. Mum and Dad, who were more conventional in their thinking, thought we were crazy, but were supportive enough to let us stick what they termed an eyesore in their garden. Our efforts at first were passable, but far from remarkable. In hindsight, we must have talked about permaculture more than actually practicing it, and ended up spending most of our time on other things. Kay and I had met only a year before Bosco passed on. I kept at the garden a little, but life tended to get in the way while I began my career in filmmaking, my other passion since I was a kid. Permaculture and my dreams of creating a food forest still occupied a place in my mind, but had mostly taken a back seat. Until the beginning of 2020, when something happened that very few saw coming. We found ourselves out of work. All of my filming jobs had been cancelled. So with a bit of free time on our hands, we decided to make the most of a bad situation. On St. Patrick's Day, while parades around the world were called off, we planted potatoes in our old duck pen beside the tunnel, a good staple crop in uncertain times. We later went completely no-dig, but I'll get to that. The next project was something I had wanted to do for many years. We turned an old raised bed and a lot of lawn area into a herb garden and dug a pond, hoping to attract more wildlife. I'd read that hedgehogs and frogs would eat slugs, but the pond did so much more than that. I had so much to learn. Where there is water, there's life, and to spend the time watching it evolve through the seasons, the years, and even a lifetime is a joy that words could never do justice. We decided we might as well grow some more spuds, enough for the neighbours too, while we were at it. One of whom had an old rusty plough in his back garden, just lying in an overgrown ditch. It was a perfect fit for Dad's little Massey Ferguson 135 he'd been using mostly to cut grass. We made drills in the field beside us, where Mam kept her chickens and 2 rescue donkeys, called Stan and Ollie. Hello, and you're very welcome back to episode 2 of Bosco's garden. We have these few drills in here: peas flowering, carrots, turnips, and spuds. Frank is still keeping an eye on things. Then up here we have our record spuds, beetroot, cauliflower here, parsnips, cabbage, peas growing up along the wire there, and up here there are sunflowers. In the last video, this yard was only beginning to take shape. Now it's pretty much done. Coming into the garden now, the oxeye daisies are in bloom, along with knapweed. Plenty of apples on the tree this year. And I finally got the pond plants in. The lilies are in bloom. Around the edges we have chives, rhubarb, lots of celery, the elder tree, cabbage, garlic, catmint there, kale, sweet corn. The sage is flowering, and it's a big hit with the bees. Out the back of the polytunnel we have roosters and queens potatoes. Then inside the polytunnel, courgettes, beetroot, lettuce, spinach, which is bolting, scallions, more lettuce, gherkins. The tomatoes have gotten a lot bigger since the last video. The yarrow is just about to flower. Lots of grapes coming up. Just a quick update on how things are coming along. Until next time. On the far side of the house, we laid down the foundations to build an open carport and workshop. Another thing my dad and I had wanted for years. I had the idea to leave some space on its southern side, where I could then build a long lean-to greenhouse, using the thermal mass of the building to store heat, and its roof to harvest rainwater. It was my greatest building feat yet, and something Bosco, who was a builder by trade and a decent carpenter, would have been proud of. In September, I hired a little digger for the weekend and dug a larger pond in the centre of what would become a long stretch of food forest on the northern side of our field. And after the new year rolled around, it was tree planting time. We planted fruit and nut trees, along with beneficial support species, to accommodate more wildlife and used for chop and drop mulching. Over the winter, I had been watching Charles Darling's YouTube channel about no-dig gardening. And though I had tried no-dig years before, replicating what folks in dry climates were doing, using materials like straw as mulch, this had only ever ended up in beds full of slugs and missing seedlings. Charles Darling's method of using well-composted material rather than straw seemed to be working very well in a climate similar to ours, where slug problems are a major issue. That spring, we decided to give it a shot. We covered our plot with cardboard, newspaper, and whatever we could find. We measured and mulched single-reach beds with compost, and the paths with wood chip, delivered to us for free by local tree surgeons, who were glad to be rid of it. To us, it was like solid gold. Fungi food. I ended up getting my own little mulcher too, scavenging trailer loads of sticks and leaves I could turn into mulch. In the summer, we gave a new home to 6 little ducklings beside the new pond in our young food forest. Khaki Campbells, or Quacky Campbells as I like to call them. The best slug enforcement agents you could hope to hire. These amazing ladies are trained to seek and destroy slugs at a rapid pace and turn them into the tastiest eggs. They're also a great pleasure to have around and full of character. Our first delve into this method of no-dig was a huge success.
So this is my main block of no-dig beds. I have 25 metre long beds. They're 75 centimetres wide. They have a layer of cardboard underneath with about 5 to 10 centimetres of compost on top and wood chip on the paths.
We started most plants in our new greenhouse nursery, which got full sun and warmed up early in the spring. We transplanted seed cells using a dibber, merely a broken spade handle I had whittled at the end. We had no weeds, except for thistles, which were large and easy to pull out. Growing food had never been easier. I had wanted no-dig to work for a long time. Building soil rather than depleting it, I thought was integral to the principles of permaculture and sustainability. Nurturing soil health, feeding and working with living organisms in our soil. This was a relationship and a subject I would soon become engrossed with. By June, we had so much food, we decided to post to our social media channels and see if anyone wanted to buy some. I'd been reading a little into market gardening and was interested to see if the garden could be a source of income to sustain our efforts. We set up a little shop, and some people actually turned up. Then more people turned up. Before we knew it, we were selling more veg than we were growing. When the season ended, even though the world was beginning to open back up properly, and I was getting job offers again, I started turning most of them down. I was enjoying this new life, living off the land, fulfilling a dream. We were earning very little, but enough to get by and expand our little growing operation. We put a plan in place for next year. We had learned so much from that season, but had never anticipated becoming a market garden. We were caught completely off guard and it had degenerated into disorganised chaos, leaving us very weary come wintertime. A good plan would make everything much easier, saving time and energy. It would allow us to grow more while working less. I planned out almost every detail, with sowing, transplanting, harvest times, successions of crops, and placement in the garden. Each bed had a number, and every succession of every crop had a code, so they could be tracked and logged in spreadsheets. All major decisions were made in the winter beforehand, so no time or energy would be wasted during the heat of the growing season. Early that spring, we set about erecting a new polytunnel, assembling it ourselves, with a few hiccups. In the end, it stood proud. 16 metres long and 5 metres wide. Small by market garden standards, but massive in the context of what we were doing. We doubled our outdoor growing space. More cardboard, more compost. Another block of 20 beds, again measuring 5 metres by 75 centimetres, with 45 centimetre wood chip paths. This standardised size for all our annual beds meant that all our nets and fleece could be the same size, all sowing quantities and seed tray sizes too, taking away any confusion or wasted time searching for the right materials. Then, after many years of persuasion, I managed to get Mam on board with replacing most of her front lawn with wildflowers, keeping it looking neat with a border of stones and a mowed windy path through the centre, just letting it grow up and allowing the pre-existing wild herbs and grasses to do their thing.
There's actually very little grass in it. There's just a ton of forget-me-nots, buttercups. There were daisies earlier on.
The result was both aesthetically beautiful, while providing the function of wildlife habitat, the perfect balance of order and chaos, a demonstration of give and take that any visitor could readily appreciate. We set up our new shop in the old family tent we used to holiday in when I was a kid. It had been sitting in the garden shed for 20 years, so it was satisfying to give it a new life. Customers coming to buy our produce appreciated its quirkiness, right next to the garden where they could see their food growing.
The shop has just been a huge success this year. People love coming and seeing the garden. I show them around the market garden, give them tours and show them where all their food is coming from. They love the authenticity of the chalet tent and that we're only selling our own produce here. It's all completely seasonal and fresh as can possibly be, and they can see the methods that we're using to grow it. It's just a great vibe around here every Friday.
People were raving about the amazing quality of our freshly picked, rich and flavoursome produce, grown using no-dig permaculture methods in living soil, beyond organic, no pesticides used, of any kind, even the organically approved ones, which aren't selective in what they kill. We rely on creating a balanced ecosystem. Pests are welcome because they're sure to attract more predator insects, making for an ever healthier garden that improves year after year. We explained the difference between what we were doing and the organic produce displayed in supermarkets, but mostly our produce spoke for itself. We opened the shop in April, and by June, local restaurants were looking to make orders. Every Friday, a steady stream of people showed up week after week. We had doubled our growing space that year, and still, we were sold out. But as fate would have it, the vet had told Mam that her donkeys were eating too much grass and were at risk of colic. We got the go-ahead to put in more garden space. This time we tried a different method of weed suppression, which at least partly omitted the need for cardboard sheet mulch.
This all looks very rough at the moment, but it's going to be completely worth it next year. This is black polythene used mostly for silage by farmers. It's just going to be sitting here for 6 to 9 months, and it's going to keep the grass down, keep all the weeds down. I won't need cardboard. I'll just be putting compost straight onto this and creating 20 new beds, another block here and a block up there. And then in the middle is going to be another pond, and around that will be a perennial food forest wildlife attractor system, bringing in pollinators and predators and keeping a balanced ecology in the garden. So it looks very rough at the moment, but it's going to be absolutely beautiful next year.
In 2023, we boldly put in 2 more blocks of beds.
There we go, 20 beds, Shawnee.
20 bed in, this is the last one. Last bit.
Woo!
Woo! That's how it's done.
We did as planned and bordered them with micro food forests of fruit trees and berry bushes, interplanted with beneficial herbs for attracting more insect life, along with edible flowers for selling to restaurants for garnish. In the centre, rather than being greedy and putting in more beds, we created another pond and perennial growing area for more wildlife habitat. Surrounding it would be a huge mix of flowers to sell to florists, and of course to bring in more wildlife. I had never really been interested in growing many flowers before, and knew very little. So while rummaging through the seed websites, I got a little carried away. But it was so worth it. The garden was complete. The food forest was growing. People were buying our produce. Our name was on restaurant menus. By the end of the 4th season, our little garden, or farm, or whatever you want to call it, it was a thing of beauty. My soul laid bare. Questions arose. I'm a gardener for sure, but was I a farmer? Or a filmmaker? Had I been making a farm? Or a film? I began making Bosco's garden videos right from the beginning in 2020. I could barely string a sentence together on camera. I always preferred to be the one behind the camera. Why did I do it? Bosco wasn't there to push me. Or was he? I kept at it. Over the course of 4 years, I had managed to step out of my comfort zone and speak to a camera. I ended up giving weekly garden tours to groups sometimes as large as 30 people. Even being invited to go on the radio and speaking on stage with large crowds about the work we were doing, something I was passionate about and believed in. When the season was over, it felt like that chapter was complete. I had, for the most part, left filmmaking for the farm life. But now it had come full circle. Little did I know, I might have been making a film all along. It took me a while to figure out what the ending for this film was. Had we just abandoned this garden we'd worked so hard on? What was the meaning of it all? I realised in the end that not only had I been growing a garden, I too had grown. All of us had. I had finally put in the effort and took the time to fulfill a dream. To prove to myself that these methods of farming with nature work. It had always made sense, and I wanted to believe the people who were talking about it. Some things, however, need to be seen with our own two eyes to fully digest and understand. I had also made peace. Nothing is better for the head than time spent in a garden. I had done Bosco proud, and by naming the garden after him, I felt he'd been there for the ride, and in a way, lives on through our actions. Mum and Dad, who had been conventionally minded, both from farming backgrounds, were also now first-hand witnesses to these once outlandish concepts at work, and are now the proud caretakers of a permaculture food forest and wildlife garden. Elated year after year, each time a new creature is spotted inhabiting the home we made for them. Meanwhile, Kay and I have begun a new journey. Again, stepping out of our comfort zone. Seeing more of the world while we're still young. Fulfilling more dreams. Taking what we learned and continuing to grow in Bosco's boots.
Some beautiful kale, salad mix, gorgeous.
One ladybird there, a ladybird there,